G'day viewers, Michael from 64 Motorsport. On this episode, I'm going to be showing you how easy it is to install a polyurethane rear shock mount on your BMW E46. Well, welcome back viewers. I'm at the boot area to remove the existing rear strut and rear strut mount on my E46. Now the reason is because I'm going to be upgrading to the ground control polyurethane rear shock mount, which is an essential upgrade if you're upgrading to a performance suspension setup on your BMW. Now the original rear shock mount is attached to the strut tower and is secured in place by two nuts. Now, to get access to those, you're going to need to remove all your boot lining, and then the strut tower itself is covered by this weird plasticky, foamy stuff. So you're going to have to cut a hole in that to get access to the top of the rear strut, and yeah, to the two 10mm nuts that secure it in place. Underneath the car, I've got the rear trailing arm supported by my trolley jack to take the load off the spring. So once I've removed this, the whole trailing arm and control arm don't just drop down to the ground and risk the spring flying out and causing some damage. So I've already got that supported. I've already loosened off these nuts. You'll need a 13mm spanner to do that. And once you've removed those, we can then go down to the rear fender or the rear wheel well and remove the bolt that secures the shocky to the rear trailing arm, and then the whole thing will just drop out, and then we can take the existing strut mount off the top of the shock and start fitting up the new ones. Okay guys, I'm down at the right hand side rear wheel well, and as you saw before, I've loosened off and taken off the two nuts that secure the rear strut mount to the strut tower at the top. The next bolt that needs to come out is the one that secures it to the rear trailing arm. So as I said, I've got the rear trailing arm supported by my trolley jack, and that's going to stop the load from the spring wanting to drop that whole assembly down to the ground and then risk the spring from flying out. So you do need to make sure you've got that really well supported. So I've taken that bolt out, and as you can see, we've got the one bolt that secures there. We put that to one side, and there we've got our shocky with the rear strut mount on top. There's one nut here. I think it's a 16mm. Yeah, 16mm nut that secures that into place. You've got a steel washer which goes on the top, your strut mount, another washer, and then a 10mm shim or washer shim. And then you got your bump stop and your dust tube. So when you're replacing the rear strut mount, it's probably a good idea to get a new bump stop. You'd be probably able to reuse the existing cover, but if like me you made the stupid mistake of chucking the whole lot out, then you're going to need to buy some new bits. So I've done that. So that's as simple as it is to remove the existing strut in preparation. As I said, I'm going to be installing the ground control, and if you want to know a bit more information about the ground control rear strut mount, then you can watch my previous video, and I'll put a link down below for that. The components that you need to keep and reinstall are the dust boot and the bump stop. They go on. If I can pick it up, the 10mm shim, and where is it? according to ground control, you don't need to reuse the top spacer or washer. You use their nut, or you use their washer on there like that. I've already got the bushes already set in. And that goes on like so. You've got the other washer that is supplied by ground control, and then your nylock securing nut. Not used to doing it left-handed, sorry. Should probably change. There we go. I'm not ambidextrous. You'll need, if I can find it, an Allen key to stop the shaft from spinning, and then your 16mm spanner, and you can just tighten it up. Now, I tried to double check the torque specs for this. Couldn't really find any. The general consensus was you tighten it up so it's tight. So there you go. If anybody has got a torque spec for this, you know, feel free to post a comment below for all our other viewers. It'd be really handy. Now I'm following the ground control instructions, and in their instructions it doesn't indicate to reuse these two washers. From my research on the internet, there seems to be a bit of confusion, because I mean, half the people say yeah you do and half they don't. I have tried installing these with this washer, and I've found that with this washer in place here, it makes it very difficult to get access to the securing nuts to tighten it up. So I'm going to try this and we'll see how we go. I'll hang on to those, because if later on I do find that I need to put them in, at least I've got them, and they're not an easy item to find here in Australia. If you need to get them, you either buy them from BMW, which is really expensive, or you can buy them from the US or the UK, and they're really cheap, but then you've got a freight factor in there as well, and it's, yeah, not something you want to have to try and chase around for. Okay, now the next step is to install the mounting plate. Now this is different because it actually drops down through the boot, so that these two bolts are now accessible from inside the wheel well. And that's what I mean, it's going to make it so much easier to make adjustments to Marconi strut down the track, because everything is accessible from the wheel well. I don't have to get inside the boot and pull lining out and all that sort of stuff to get access to the two nuts anymore. So that's a real plus with this ground control setup. There's a steel plate which acts as a strut tower reinforcement plate as well, which is ideal. You'll need a new gasket. Now I bought the kit and it came with the gasket. If not, then you'll need to make sure you've got a new gasket. I'm just going to drop this through and then we'll get back onto the rest of the install. Okay, so I've got that plate dropped down now. The tricky part is securing it. Is securing it in place without pushing it through. So I've got the nuts on one side, and that should hold it in place and stop the other side from pushing through. So I got that on there. Make sure you use the washers as well. and then just a 13mm socket to tighten them up. I like to do a bit of a turn on each side. So that it sort of goes in roughly even on both sides. Once again, there's no real torque spec for these. I'm sure there is one somewhere, but I've not been able to track one down other than the generic nut size torque spec that you can find. But I'm sure tight is about right. I can't imagine it'd be any more than 20, 25 Newton meters. There you go, and that's done. So the only thing now, and I'm thinking it's sitting under my foot somewhere, it is to put the securing bolt in to the rear trailing arm. It turns out there's a right direction and a wrong direction for the strut mount. Basically the curved part faces towards the boot and the flat part faces towards the outer side of the car. So I just had to swap that around. Now I can get my fixing bolt into the rear trailing arm and we should be sweet. So the advantage of having it on the jack is I can adjust the height of the rear trailing arm to get the nut and the bolt just in the right spot. So makes it a little bit easier. Now I do have a torque spec for these and I'm pretty sure it was between 60 and 65 foot-pounds, but I'll double check that. But that's pretty tight. So to just recap, by having the two nuts now located in the wheel well, that's those two nuts and this one bolt, and I can remove my Coney strut, adjust the compression rate, and then reinstall it. The other option I've got is if I'm finding it's too stiff with the setup with those polyurethane bushes that I installed, I can swap those around to the softer setup as well. So really easy upgrade, certainly worthwhile doing if you've got performance or coilover setup on your E46, because you'll struggle with rear shock mount blowout otherwise. It'll also help your strut to perform a lot better because having the polyurethane bushes will take out a lot of the side load on your strut rod and means that the strut will perform more freely in its up and down motion. And that's about it. So if you've got any questions, I'd really appreciate any questions or comments regarding the setup that I've opted for, why I chose the ground control rear strut mount or why I chose the H&R Coney setup. Any of your feedback, if you've got any comments in relation to using the existing hardware and that sort of thing, please drop me a line. So we produce content for BMW and car enthusiasts on DIY, maintenance and also performance upgrades. So if this sounds like the sort of thing that you might be interested in, please consider subscribing by hitting the subscribe button below. And if you hit the bell as well, you'll get regular updates or get advised when new content arrives as well. So thanks very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it and given you a bit of an insight into the rear strut mount and how easy it is to make this performance upgrade at home in your garage like I've done. But until next time, TTFN.